Hi, my name's Anthony Porter, and I first want to thank you for showing interest in TrustM365. There is some assumptions which are related to the assumption that you have already downloaded the repository. If you have yet to download the repository, I will place the instructions within this description, but also they exist within the GitHub repository for your convenience as well. Once you have downloaded this repository, you would extract the files to a location of your choice on your machine. And I would first recommend renaming the environment file to remove the .example, as this is the template used. Alternatively, if you would like, you could copy this file and then remove the .example. Once you have done this, I would recommend opening either Terminal or VS Code to be able to complete the next steps. Once you are here, you have the ability to start a new terminal, and then under Docs, there is the deployment. We will be going through the quick start guide, in which in this case, we will be using our local NPM to be able to run this process. First, if you have not yet downloaded the repository, you can do so. But once again, completing from step 2, we will go through the npm run install all function to make sure that all of the requirements are found and installed. If there are any audit fix requirements, please go ahead and do that. I'll do what I can with regards to the repository, but this is the assumption that this is running locally. So there may be some vulnerabilities which are found in which using the npm audit fix would be able to resolve. Once you've created this, you would then run the npm run generate key. This is to secure you a encryption key for the system that you're about to install. You would copy the following key, and then from the repository, edit your environment file using Notepad will do, and placing it here, the your 64 character hex key here. Once that is done, save the file and close. Now within VS Code, we've done all these steps manually, so we would use the run dev. Once this is done, it'll run your npm site and present you with the local host. In this case, it's localhost 5173. From here, you're ready to go. The first thing you're going to want to do, obviously, is to register your first tenant. Now, there is some instructions that are presented here, in which it is to create an app registration, name the registration TrustM365 or any desired name you wish, select that it is this organization only, so that's the single tenant only, and then click register. Once that is complete, you would copy the application ID and just directory ID, so that's the client ID and tenant ID, and then also create a secret, set the expiry and click add. And now as a reminder, once you create this value, it will hide automatically, so make sure that you save this to a repository that you require. In an example, I can show you that once again, there is a single tenant option, so if you do have issues setting it up, you can change the supported account to single tenant. And then within your secret, you have the ability to create a secret for a period of time, and the value exists only for that session. If you refresh, you'll be required to create a new secret. From this, there is also a set of API permissions that I would recommend. The following provides you an overview of your tenant at a base level, but there will be additional permissions which are within the documentation which you may be interested in trying to apply. In this case, my application registration has a fair few. What we'll do is we'll go through the registration process. So in my case, what you'll then be presented with is an overview of what is unlocked in your environment. The idea of this is that there is areas of access which you have read-only access, where the API permissions only include read, and then you also have full access, which is your write permissions, where the API permission sees read-write. If you have any problems within this area, you then have the ability to go back to your app registration, make the changes you require, and select recheck now after about 30 seconds, and this will reflect within this screen. Once you're happy, you would click register tenant, and you've essentially added your first tenant. In this case, just for the example's sake, you do have the ability to create multiple tenants, which I will do so here. In this example, you can see that this is a different set of permissions associated, but with a similar understanding. So here we have Contoso Demo and securing M365. Now the core functionality of this site is obviously the ability to monitor, create a baseline, and restore. And that's what I'm going to show you today. Using securing M365, you have the ability to check a list of resource areas. This stems across Intune and Entra currently, and will be expanded upon in future. We'll use a user account as an example. You have the ability to manage. In this case, you have the ability to, using Graph API, pull live data from a tenant and view a current state of your environment. You can see here that we do not have a baseline set, and we should probably do that. In this baseline, you have the ability to select one or multiple resources that you wish to monitor. In this case, I look to use the demo user one. In this case, you also have the ability to monitor any changes, or if you're only interested in specific changes, you have the ability to select them. So in this case, we could look for things like the display name, the job title, and potentially the office location. Once you're happy, you can set the baseline label. This is your identifier for this baseline. And if you did wish, you have the ability to create groups in which those groups have the ability to have multiple users added for your convenience. Once you're happy with this baseline, you would select Save Baseline. Once this is created, if you were to pull additional information, you will see that there is all clean baseline. All of your resources currently match. Now, in an example, if one of the properties that we chose happened to have changed, in this case, we'll go display name, we'll call it demo broken one. We'll also go ahead and change the job title to not a job, and we'll save the content. What this then does is, based on a reoccurring cycle, or if you were to manually prompt this, if you were to pull live data, you can see that we have a drift. That drift itself is the job title and the display name, the three properties that we displayed. Now, one of the benefits to this is that we have the ability to restore at a property level, restore at a resource level, or restore all. In this case, I'll restore the job title at a property level, in which this will push the job title from not a job back to job title, in which if we refresh, it's back to job title. Now we can see demo broken 1 is still the display name. So if we were to go back and pull, you'll see that job title is now fixed, but display name is still broken. In this case, we'll restore it at a resource level. What this will do is it'll check for all of the required fixes that can be done automatically through API. And once complete, we'll result back to demo user 1 as the display name. We can see here that the resource in this example is now back to our desired state. We also have the ability to have a restore log. The idea of this log is that it's able to track when and what has happened and what restores were completed. In this case, we did the job title at a property level and we did a full restore soon after, and these were marked okay. No errors existed. Now, if you wanted to change your baseline, for example, if you wanted to make additional changes to what exists, you have the ability to reload from live and see all of your available. Now, in this case, we can see that all 3 are going to be set to snapshot. So any changes made. In this case, we'll call it baseline user 2. Once we save this baseline, you can see that the users is still grouped and our others are still existing. If we pull from live, you can see that we have a clean slate. Now, one of the benefits to this is your ability to check when a baseline has changed and the ability to view what was in that baseline and also restore it if you wish to revert. Back to the home screen, this now states that we have a clean baseline, 14 areas not currently with a baseline, and also provide you an area where you would specify if there was any drift. This also is reflected on the home screen for your convenience as well. Now, given that this is also a tool for an MSSP background, we've given some portfolio options. In this case, your ability to check across multiple portfolios on a scorecard or matrix view to show the compliance across multiple tenants, and the ability to download that in CSV and JSON. Now, the third option here also is reporting. I'll go through that in a moment. One of the benefits I wanted to show is from that overview screen, you have the ability to configure whether you want auto restore enabled. There are some settings in regards to the automatic drift detection, whether you want the sync to occur on a reoccurring period or if you would like it to be manual, and the ability to update your secret and permissions associated if you did wish to change or remove functionality depending on your requirements. There's also the ability to sync all, in which this will go through your environment and sync all of the policies at once, which is extremely useful. What I'll do in this case is I will sync both, as some of the functionality in this requires that it will use the most recent snapshot of information. Baseline templates is your ability to have certain tests in which the current tests are based on Maester and the CISA SCuBA guidelines. The ability to be able to run a check over tenants to be able to confirm certain security properties are enabled. In this case, we'll run it over the top of both, in which you can see that some have passed and some have failed. In this case, we have your SCuBA, which we can see here, MFA required for all users. We can see that the Contoso demo tenant has a conditional access policy in place, whereas the Securing M365 does not. Other areas such as SMS authentication being disabled is effective in both tenants. This operates off of the last sync, and that sync has to be completed within the tenant itself. Now is for the MSSP settings. The idea of this is your ability to white label functionality, specifically around the portal and around the reporting. In this example, there is no white labeling enabled, so you can see that TrustM365 is the current naming convention. In this case, we use the organization name of Acme Security Company and the tagline Security Matters. What we also have the ability to do is put together a baseline default label. This is the label that occurs anytime you go to set a label, and you have the ability to include the date property, which will automatically preview the date. This is an easy way to ensure that you will have an always up-to-date baseline and a reference to when it is. You also have the ability to add your own logo. If you are picky like me, you probably also like the ability to change your accent coloring, the report branding coloring as well, and the time zone associated. There is also the ability to have a webhook to be able to notify you when drift has occurred within your environment. In this case, we'll save the settings. If there is a function that you wish to monitor that you have yet to have configured within the standard, you do have the ability to create a custom collector, in which in this case you would go through and you would use your Graph API endpoint, identify the fields associated, test the functionality, and go from there. And finally, under reports, changing it back because my eyesight, we have reports. The idea of reports is there is two functions. One of the functions is baseline export. The idea of this is the ability to actively check what is the current baseline and the configuration that is taken, as well as past versions if you wished, and the ability to generate a report which shows you the contents of that baseline. This can be quite helpful if there is documentation requirements. Alternatively, you can view this as a PDF or download it as a Word to edit. And last, there is the ability to have reports. Now these reports have the ability to be set at a tenant level, date back 7, 30 and 90 days depending on your requirements. And what this essentially does is captures key events that have occurred over that period of time. We can see here that we've had one drift occur, the two remediations in which they were both the property level restore and the resource level restore, that there is 0 outstanding, there is 1 monitored area over a possible 15, and that there is 100% coverage associated to those areas baseline exists. We also have the ability to add an executive summary. Across this, you'll see that there will be a blue dot where it states that there's comment been added. In this case, we'll move down to drift history, and we can see here that from that, there is a user account that's had the drift occur. Remediation logs associated to what's happened, that it was a manual trigger. The coverage of baseline, in which we have only got user account and it is currently clean. And the current state. So that gives you an overview as to what's happened within the environment over that period of time. So in this case, we've got 3 members, 1 security group, and 2 application registrations. Once you're happy, generate the report. You can see here that our Acme Security Company, Security Matters, across the securing M365 tenant over the period of time, has recorded the following, adding the MSSP's name to the commentary section, providing you all the information you require. You then have the ability to download this as a Word or a PDF. All of this is trackable. Last but not least, there is light mode and dark mode. If you wish, You have the ability to mark your tenants on the side with favorites. So in this case, user accounts would be a good one. You also have the ability to delete the tenant if you wish, and add tagging associated to specific tenants that may have specific requirements. So in this case, it could be a development tenant and a production tenant, or a specific client. There is one final part that I would like to mention, as some of these areas do have configuration which is not pushable via graph. When there is a drift that occurs, it will specify that there is a fix required, but it will state that the fix must be completed within the portal. With that, this concludes the tutorial of TrustM365 within your tenant. I hope to hear all of your feedback, and I hope that this serves you well. Thank you.